What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Opening Line. I'm your host, Paulie, joined once again by Frank Brink. We're going to talk a little bit about the Zozo Championship. But before we do, let's get some thoughts about last week.
Yeah, really interesting week. A lot of guys that underperformed end up at the top of the board there. You had one guy close. I had an abysmal week in terms of outrights. I didn't really have anyone close all week. So that's how that went for me. But I had Sink and Varner top 20s. They had a really good chance to top 20, and everyone seemed to struggle. Every single guy I bet on besides Poulter seemed to struggle. So I lost about a unit last week. I literally just needed one more guy to squeeze in there, and I've been good. But unfortunately, didn't go my way, and that's okay. Now, right, a couple weeks ago, so we're still up on the season.
Yeah, last week with Rory was pretty disappointing in my end. In terms of ball striking, the handicapping was correct, except the problem is he caught a hot short game.
Yeah, so 6 strokes putting for Rory, which is unheard of.
and 3 shots chipping.
Yeah, right.
So when you gain 9 strokes with your short game, when you're not normally known for that, that's the difference between finishing first and 32nd. And what happens is we had matchups against last week against Morikawa, lost by 1. Also had the Morikawa outright, and then also had him head-to-head against Thomas and Schauffele for the week. And both those guys finished top 20, to where if Rory had just a normal short game, those both would have cashed. Morikawa would have cashed. Morikawa would have won the event, and it would just been like an amazing week. That was like a 20-unit swing right there, which sounds nuts, but like literally Rory's short game just really put a damper on the weekend there. But It is what it is, and just have to move on to next week.
Yep, I agree.
All right, so this week we got Zozo Championship, which is another limited field, no-cut event. And this week it's going to be back in Japan. So last year they had it in Sherwood Country Club out in California due to COVID, but they're back in Japan. This event was first held in 2019. It's at Narashino Country Club out there in Japan. And they're back at the same place this year. The only thing is the field is a lot worse than it's been the last 2 years, to where this is almost feels like an opposite field event in terms of the strength of schedule, because they just went down the FedEx Cup standings and asked guys, hey, do you want to play? Yes or no? And took the top 60 guys. Well, they literally went through the whole entire standings to get the field. And added some guys outside the top 125 too. So it's not a strong field. It's very top heavy in terms of players who can contend here. So it creates a little bit interesting dichotomy in terms of how we're going to handicap this event, because you got a bunch of players from the Japan Golf Tour playing, a dozen or so, plus some bottom level tour players, and a couple top level players like Xander and Colin Morikawa.
Yeah, I was only able to grade like 50 some guys because of the size of the field, but also like, you're getting like the regular Asian and mostly, I think almost all of the sort towards the bottom of the field are Japan golfers that I don't want to say don't have a chance to win, but we saw some guys compete last week in a similar spot, but they don't really have, right? Like they're almost impossible to grade, and they have such high odds that it's sort of tough to do, isn't it?
Those guys are the absolute perfect guys for finishing some props or head-to-heads, because the books have no clue how to price them. So I actually bet 3 of those guys for top 40s this week. Guys that be like, who are they? That's oftentimes you can find the money in these events, is because the books just kind of throw a number out and it's like, we'll toss it out there. No one's really going to bet on them, but I will.
Yeah, there you go. You just have to pronounce some names here as we get going.
I'll 100% pronounce the names. I think you're going to force me to give out all 3 of those just so you have to hear me pronounce those names correctly. But
yeah, I will. That's fair. That's fair. Let's give out the card.
All right. Yeah. Just talking about the course here, there's no real strokes gained data at the golf course here. So we are a little bit limited in what's, out there from when it was played there in 2019. But based upon, we can kind of walk backwards, construct how the shots are played into the holes by looking at the course layout, scorecard, figuring out what the yardages are, how the holes played in terms of scoring, what were the greens hit, fairways hit. We have that information. So based upon that, the course is pretty interesting, because it's par 70, a little over 7,000 yards long, which makes you think, oh my God, it's going to be super short. Guys are just going to hit wedges and everything. That's not necessarily the case. It's because of the way the course is set up. So the course is 5 par 3s, all of them are between 141 and 191. So you don't have any of these super long par 3s that are 220 yards that we see every week on tour. They're all pretty short. So you're giving a lot of shots from 150 to 200 there, right? In terms of approach shots. Par 4 is also interesting. You have 4 of them that are 405 yards or shorter, and you have 5 of them that are 485 yards or longer. Those 5 long holes were 5 of the 6 hardest holes on the golf course, and those are also 5 of the only 6 holes that played over par. So it's going to be key how you can play those holes, because if you miss the fairway on those holes, it's going to be very difficult to hit the green, and it's going to start causing bogeys. On the other hand, on the short ones, if you can keep in the fairway, you're going to have a very good birdie opportunity. So you're going to have a lot of ebbs and flows in the leaderboard here, where you have a lot of birdies, bogeys, and not a lot of flatline pars, just because of the way the course is set up there. Going back to the par 3s, 4 out of the 5 of those played under par when I was here 2 years ago. If you go to the par 5, there's only 3 of them. Probably 2 of them are going to be reachable. A third one might be. And but they all played under par. One of them played, I think, like almost half a shot under par. The other one about 0.3 shots. The other one about 0.1. So basically, players will be able to 1 under par through 3 par 5s. But if a guy can happen to get hot on the par 5s, you can kind of make up some, ground on the field, that's kind of what we've seen here in the past.
Yeah, and from the data that I've seen, and just relying on other websites, and like you said, some of just the base data we have, it looks like driver distance kind of matters, and driving accuracy sort of goes down, and then from there, it's really hard to make an assessment, really, right? Like your expertise in golf obviously allows you to do that. For me, it's a little bit tougher, so I'm giving a small boost to guys that are longer hitters that are maybe less accurate, and those things typically do tend to correlate, not always, but typically do tend to correlate. So longer hitters in general. And then from there, I'm kind of just guessing a little bit from there on out. So kind of treating it like the tour average course with a little bit boost to driving distance for me. Is there anything else, like a certain game that you prefer here? I know we typically talk about that, and I know this limited field kind of limits, the exact player we're looking for, but is there anyone that you specifically target because of game alone?
Yeah, there's really not much of an edge in terms of like predicting what certain things are needed for this golf course. So you're talking about the accuracy, right? So PGA Tour accuracy is about 63% for fairways. It's 54% here when it was in 2019. So for me, the only time accuracy is going to be needed on this course is going to be those 5 long par 4s and the par 5s. Because you're not going to be able to hit a long iron or a hybrid or a 3-wood out of those and get to the greens or control it enough. So accuracy is only needed on those. The short hole is not going to matter because you got a wedge in the green, right? If we're talking about greens and regulation, tour average is 66%. It was 68% here. So pretty much right around the same. When we're talking about, approach shots, usually most weeks we'll have 1 or 2 like yardage buckets that are kind of a little bit more important compared to like tour standards, right? Well, if breaking down the course that I do every week is I'll go through, look at the course layout, look at the yardages, and see how the golfer's going to play it. So if there's a dog leg, or the player's going to lay up, or the bunkers, water, if they're going to lay up, and figure out what exact approach yards you're going to have. So based on what I'm seeing is you're going to have between 150 and 200 yards. You're going to have about 9 shots. You're going to have 4 of the 5 par 3s, plus probably all 5 of the long par 4s there. That's pretty much half your approach shots, right? Well, tour average is 48% in that category. So no real big difference there. You then look inside 150 yards. You're probably going to have 5 short par 4s, a par 3, and probably, one of the par 5s are laying up to 7 shots. That's, 30, around 35, 40%. It's right on tour average is like 38%. So that's what we're going to see there. The same thing outside 200 yards. The only 2 shots you're going to see from that are guys going for par 5s and 2, which is right around the tour average of 14%. So that's just kind of a sanity check that I was doing just to make sure that I'm not missing a yardage bucket where, hey, wedges are really important, or long irons or mid irons. So this week, what I'm basically saying is just use your overall stats, use overall ball striking with approach. Off the tee game, probably a little bit of both. You want a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of distance. So as weird as it sounds, treat it like literally like a normal projection model and don't add any type of emphasis on any category.
Okay, let's jump in.
All right, so we got outrights here. I bet 2 players. I think you bet me about 5 players there. You want to go first here, Frank?
Yeah, I can go first. First guy on the board for me that I like the most this week is Maverick McNealy, 35-1. I haven't bet him at all. I know you've been a little bit high on him at times. Kind of an interesting setup here. He looks like, in my model, to be about an average PGA Tour golfer, or slightly above average in almost every category, right? Approach, around the green, putting, distance, accuracy, everything looks average to slightly above average. And in a field like this, I think that's like pretty decent value. We've seen at times guys like Harris English sort of hang out around in this number with a somewhat similar skill set. Now Harris English has proved to have like an elite level short game, right? That has propelled his slightly above average ball striking along the way. But McNealy kind of rising in that category for me. He's made like 10 of his last 11 cuts. I think the BMW wasn't a cut event, but 10 or 9 of his last 10 cut events with a ton of top 20s in there. And when you translate that out to an event like this, I think that's sort of competing for a win here. He finished second in the first in his first event, the Fortinet Championship of the 2022 season. He missed the cut at the Shriners, and then T38 last week, where he actually lost strokes on approach, but he did make it up in short game. So I do like McNealy this week, sitting around 35-1. Like I said, he doesn't do anything spectacular, but he also does everything well. So in a field like this, I think that translates.
Yeah, so the only thing that kind of concerns me slightly a bit about McNealy, not just trying to play devil's advocate here, is so last week he was playing at one of his home courses there in Vegas, and he lost strokes ball striking. So that's the only thing that has me a little scared at a short number with a guy who hasn't won. Now, sure, he was close to winning a couple weeks ago out in California, but 35-1 seemed a little bit short, just playing devil's advocate. But in a week like this, you really don't know what's going to happen. So
with the travel and everything, he did spray it last week. He hit 9% less fairways than the field last week. The weeks prior to that, he gained 6 strokes on approach, more than 6 strokes, 6 strokes off the tee in the last 2 weeks in 6 rounds, or the 2 events before that. So the driver has been good for him. He's not the greatest approach player, but if he continues sort of driving it, long and accurate, despite last week, I think, that will certainly help his chances this week as well.
All right, so my first play was a player who I think, this may sound crazy, finished 59th last week and could have won. Hideki Matsuyama, 14-1. Hideki had one of his worst short game performances I've ever seen out of him. Now, I know he's not a great putter, but this was absolutely atrocious. He lost 9.6 strokes putting. Jesus. If he just putted average last week, just average, putting alone, he would have gone from 59th to 9th.
God forbid he gained a stroke or two, right?
Right? You compare him to Rory McIlroy, right? Everyone's like, oh, Rory played so good last week, right? He beat Rory by 2.4 shots in the tournament off the tee and on approach. So he hit the ball literally 2.5 shots better than Rory McIlroy, who won the event.
And lost 15 putting to him.
And literally lost everything on short game, chipping and putting to Rory. Yeah. And Rory pretty much short game wise rates out very similar to Matsuyama. Yeah. Right? Yeah. When they get hot, cool, but other than that, it's kind of about evenish, right? Somewhere around there. And that was just the big difference last week. And now we're getting a 14-1 number for Matsuyama, whereas like if he putted average and finished 9th, we would have got 10-1, right? Like you're giving me double the odds of Morikawa and Schauffele, maybe even more here, for a guy who, guess what's in his home country, finished runner-up the last time I was here, already got a big win this past year, getting his, got the Masters win and stuff like that. This just seems way too short of a number. I think this should be closer to 10-1. Give me Matsuyama.
Yeah, he's obviously played here. He plays well here. But like you said, Xander's sitting out there like 5-6-1. Right, and then Matsuyama's sitting at 14. And granted, the putter isn't good, but if you're gonna bet on anything, right, it's for rebounding and putting. His approach game is extremely good, which is going to prove out again this week, I think. You got one more out there, which is a little bit of a surprising play. Why don't you tell me about it?
Yeah, this is one where I think some people may be on it. I think a lot of people on the data side aren't going to get to this number.
I am not going to get there. I will not get there.
So Rickie Fowler, 25-1 here. I make the number about 20 on him. He actually led the field strokes gained tee to green last week, and the majority of that came off the tee. So he absolutely dominated off the tee last week. He gained more shots than Rory McIlroy off the tee. He gained more shots literally than any other player off the tee last week. He hit it long. He had it literally on a string the whole entire week. And so basically, he played the season, had issues not getting the FedEx Cup playoffs. Literally just rebooted everything. Took some time off and then went to work on his swing. He's only played one other event besides this, narrowly missing the cut by 1. but we're able to see small changes in his swing that we can see, okay, he's made adjustments here to where I think we're getting him on the upswing here because he kind of took a little bit of introspection, looked at himself and said, hey, I need to make some changes, get my game back. Looked amazing off the tee and lost strokes putting last week and shot 22 under par. That's pretty hard to do, right? So you get the ball great.
Did you notice anything from him last week? Because I'm looking at his numbers. He was 17 yards longer than the average player last week, and he hit 16% more fairways. Now, those things can correlate, right? If you hit the ball in the fairway, it tends to bounce, right, and go a little bit further. But have you noticed or heard anything about potential distance gains for him, or do you think it was mostly because he hit so many fairways?
Getting in much better position at the top. So when he used to go up to the top, he'd have a little bit extra like wrist hinge, and the club would almost come backwards. It's not coming back as much this time, and it's getting him in a better position to get it in the slot on the way down, and he's able to clear through a little bit easier. Because before off the tee, when he had problems, he'd have a double miss, right? He'd hit one way left and then block it way right. Similar to what we see when Rory McIlroy has problems, right? He hits that block right or the pull hook left, right?
Yep.
Meanwhile, now all of a sudden Rickie can just kind of get it right on plane and fire down the line. And that's why he's had it on a string, because he just kind of fixed some little small flaws in his swing. And all of a sudden, voila, he just started striking the ball great. And the thing is, we know Rickie can be a really good putter at times. And like absolutely get red hot to where he can be the best putter in the field. And that's not surprising at all. Right, based upon his history over, what it was, 10, 15-year history, right?
Yeah, I mean, just a few years ago, we were talking about, Jason Day was the best putter in the world, but Rickie was right there on his tail, right? It was like those two and everyone else, basically.
Exactly. So, like, he's dangerous on a golf course here if he, can hit his driver as well as he's hitting it right now and just have somewhat average or above average approach play. He could win this week, and he already got a taste of, being, in the lead on Sunday this past week. This field's not good, so, like, sure, you're going to be wondering, oh, well, how's he going to close an event, right? I know Fowler kind of struggles to close events on Sundays, but you have to realize that most of the guys in this field are going to struggle to close events on Sundays, right? The only one I wouldn't say is probably Morikawa. The rest of the guys are all guys that are probably not your top-level guys that aren't going to be a full-on closer on Sundays. So you put them against Fowler on a Sunday, heads up, I'm not as worried as I, would have been this past week when you had, other guys like Rory or Morikawa up on top there on Sunday.
Yeah, and some of these guys at the top, exactly like you mentioned, you look at Xander sitting around 5-1. Like, it's been so long since we've seen him close out a tournament. Right now, this should be a good course. Every course is a good course for Xander, right? But like he's sitting there at 5-1, and we just haven't seen it. Zalator 16-1, just really haven't seen it. And like you said, outside of Morikawa, a lot of these guys just do struggle to sort of hold it together. And relating at least a little bit back to your Matsuyama ticket, like, if all four of these guys at the top of the board, five of these guys top of the board are tied, just hypothetically, right, on going into the final round, you're probably trusting guys like this that have a little bit of fire, like Matsuyama or Morikawa more than or Fowler more than a lot of, or at least just as much as a lot of the other guys at the top of the board that have much shorter odds.
Yeah, definitely. Were there any other outrights you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to do one more since I have so many plays here. I played Johnny Vegas at 31 to 1. I think anything above 30 has some value here. I thought he should have been in the low 20s in this field. Now, granted, that is purely going on the fact that I definitely rate guys like Fowler a little bit lower and maybe even Zalatoris a little bit lower than what the numbers are listed at, but Vegas was really good last week. His ball striking was unbelievable, and I talked about how I'm going to favor driving distance a little bit more than accuracy. That's sort of his thing, right? He still bombs it, and he's still a very good approach player. Much like Matsuyama, he cannot putt, but he did actually sit around even last week in terms of strokes gained putting, and boom, he had a T14 in there. Gained a ton of strokes on ball striking off the T plus approach, gained a ton of strokes there. And honestly, more recently, coming down towards the end of the season there, he played pretty good golf. I mean, he had, I think, 3 or 4 second place finishes last season, made the, down to the second round in the playoffs. But going into the playoffs, he finished T15, T16, T2, T11. He's been really good, especially in these shorter fields where he can kind of hit it past everyone, and his approach game's still pretty solid. He just cannot putt. So it's just really a matter of like, okay, does he sink some putts and maybe get in contention this week?
All right, let's move on to finishing position here. So I see you have some top 40s. I have a couple. You have some top 20s. I have some top 40s. I'll hop in first here. Talk about, since you're making me pronounce all 3 of these names, I'm glad to do it because I've actually seen these guys play, believe it or not. Not in person, on TV. Keita Nakajima. You're wondering who the heck is this guy? First of all, we're getting him top 40 plus 190 in a 78 person field. He's an amateur. And you're wondering, are you really betting on a Japanese amateur in a tour event? He's the number 1 ranked amateur in the world. He's won on the Japan golf tour as an amateur, had a couple other top finishes in there. Guy's got a lot of upside here in a field where he's got nothing really to lose here. Just kind of free rolling it. Doesn't have to worry about money or anything like that. Just literally just free rolling, playing here as an AM. And I think he feels kind of comfortable here. 40 out of 78 players, I would be worried about if it was the normal strength of field we see for this event. 2 years ago, it was a really strong field. If it would have been something like last week, really strong field. Like the middle of this field is just awful in terms of the strength, right? So I'm not worried when you're putting him up against guys like maybe a Troy Merritt or a Doc Redman or Roger Sloan. Like, these are not guys that are scaring me versus someone here who has nothing to lose as an amateur, and you're giving me almost 2 to 1, 2 to 1 on the number. I'm going to take that.
He's not traveling, right? Like, that has to play a factor, right?
Yeah. Also probably played the golf course a bunch, knows the area, knows conditions. Like I said, the jet lag's really bad because you're losing literally a full day traveling because you're losing, was it 13 hours, something like that, plus the 12-hour plus flight. So you literally lose a full day. You could, guys that are coming from Vegas were leaving, Sunday night and landing Tuesday morning over there. So
that's crazy. Yeah.
That's a tough sell there, especially if you don't know the golf course.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead. You got 2 more in here. All right, I'm gonna make you. That name was good. I'm assuming that was correct, but it sounded good coming off the tongue.
Next one's gonna be Tomoharu Otsuki. So I got him at plus 165. It's gone down to plus 135 already. I would still play it there. I wouldn't go any lower than 130 though on that. Okay. It's another guy. He's not an amateur, but he's just played really well on the Japan Golf Tour of late. And I just think the books just don't know how to price guys like this. He's just been very consistent. So in his last 8 starts, I think he has 4 top 4 finishes. Pretty much makes every single cut. He's kind of like a Will Zalatoris, Matt Kuchar of the Japan Golf Tour, where he just is super consistent every single week. And in a weak field like this, top 40 out of 78, if he just has a consistent week, literally, I think this number should be about a coin flip, about pick 'em, and we're getting 135 to 165. So just kind of playing along those lines. So once again, books don't know how to set odds to these guys that are throwing numbers out there.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his chart here, and granted, it is the Japan Tour, and it looks like he maybe plays a few other places, but he hasn't missed a cut since the 2020 season.
Yeah,
sounds good. Sounds decent.
Yeah, so now, sure, those strengths of field were not great, but the strength of field here isn't great either. So
right, yeah, it's like half the field is probably similar to what he's dealing with there. You got one more here.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna Ryosuke Kinoshita. So it's gonna
be a good one. I was like, "There's no way he's getting this one." That was good.
No, trust me. I actually watch a bunch of Asian Tour golf, so I don't sleep. So I've actually seen some of these guys play when they've televised either some Japan stuff or some of the Asian Tour stuff. At plus 140, it's down to plus 110. I'd play it down to even money. I'd make the line about minus 120 here on him. This is a guy who's one of the most successful players on the tour. He's also up to number 72 in the world rankings. Guessing you probably didn't know that, which is a heck of a lot better than any other guys that are priced down here. Like literally, if you look at just the world ranking, that would get him about minus 150 based upon all the other guys in the top 40 listings here. Just the way he's been playing, right? In his last 6 events in the Japan Tour, he's got 5 top 9 finishes. On top of that, earlier in the year, in the middle of summer, he had back-to-back wins in the Japan Tour. So now, sure, I know it's Japan Tour, not PGA Tour. But like we said, strength of field is not good this week. And it's a guy that's comfortable, feels, doesn't have to deal with any of the jet lag and stuff like that. Give me, I got these 3 guys at plus money. If one of them hits, we're about even. If 2 of them hit, we're rolling in dough. If all 3 hit, we're jumping for joy, right? So that's
you win that first. I mean, you win the first one, you're making money no matter what, basically, in these top 40s, and God forbid you bang another one in there, right?
Yep, definitely, and it's not asking for much for top 40, right? This is literally just top half of the field in a very weak field, so I don't think it's that crazy to ask for that. So why don't you toss out some top 20s here, Frank?
Yeah, I'll give you one. going in here, I have a handful more. They kind of line up with my outright, so you can kind of imply from there. But I did play some top 20 similar to last week, and my main one here, Harry Higgs, the one I like the most. T9 last week, mostly with the putter, but that's sort of his game. He's okay on approach. He's okay with the driver. He doesn't blow you away. He's just pretty average. But his short game's extremely good. He's very good around the greens. Granted, he wasn't very good around the green last week, but he did make it up with the putter. The previous two events, he really didn't putt well, but still finished T27 at the Shriners. And we look at towards the end of last season, he really struggled, in sort of June, July in there, and then went T15, T16, T38 right through the playoffs. And he's just playing really good golf recently. So to get him at a plus 220 dog here to finish inside the top 20 in this field, which is not particularly great for a guy that has played pretty well recently, I do like Higgs a little bit this week at that number.
All right, so that wraps everything up for this week. I'll have some of the other bets for like the tournament head-to-heads posted up there later today. Don't forget, since this event is in Japan, it does start Wednesday evening around like 6 p.m., somewhere around there. So make sure you get your bets, or if you're doing any DFS, you get all that locked in beforehand. And we will see you guys next week.
See ya.